Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the On Becoming Legend podcast, where every week it's my job to help you live a legendary life in whatever way you define it. I do this by bringing you content and lessons from my own life so you can learn from my mistakes and hopefully avoid them, and also by interviewing other legendary people so you can learn from their stories as well. This week, I'm interviewing the legendary Barbara Vercruysse. Barbara is a mentor, business coach, thought leader, and public speaker. And after facing several challenges in life and surviving a stage 4 skin cancer at the age of 32, she decided to live her second life to the fullest. After running a 6-figure construction business for 18 years, she now dedicates herself to her true passion, guiding people through a deep transformation. She supports people around the world in leading a fulfilled life, creating impact and success by living and leading with love. One of her clients is BMW, where she operates as a business coach and is responsible for screening all business processes and guiding people to perform optimally in their job. Barbara, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to be here, Rory, with you.
It's so good to have you. So I want to talk a lot about your story and we're going to dive into it, but I want to go all the way back to the beginning. And a question I like to ask. So when you were younger, well, let's just focus on teens, looking at college and kind of thinking about making that decision. Who were the people in your life whose approval that you wanted? For me, it was always my mom and dad, my nuclear family. For some people, it's coaches or pastors or whoever. I'm just curious to know who, in those formative years, who were the people that you wanted approval from?
I think 1 or 2 teachers, because my parents were always happy with what I did. For them, it was more than enough. I had high grades in school because I'm an achiever in who I am. And they were more slowing me down. It's okay. It's okay.
Live a little.
So I had my teacher of Latin and my teacher of history, who were really people I admired and look up to. And I really wanted to show them what I was capable of.
That's awesome. So how did that affect the decisions you made? And obviously, in high school, sort of the biggest first decision that a lot of us make is going to college. So how did that influence your decision there?
Not so much, because at 18, I had no clue what I wanted to do. Even in high school, I was quite rebellious about the whole education system. I was like, okay, even though I had that dual feeling, okay, I'm in the system. Maybe it's also because I'm a woman or I was a girl, and girls are more, okay, you have to get grades. And at the other side, I could see that school was not teaching me anything on life. I had a quite tough childhood at home. It was not the most stable environment, you could say. And I could see that, in school, we weren't taught to deal with difficult situations. We weren't taught to become, you could say, a great person, or to reveal the greatness in us. So at 18, I had one thing on my mind. It was just to see the world. And I wanted to do a bachelor in tourism, and my father said no. It's the first time he said no. He said, you're going to do a master. And I was like, okay, I have to do a master. What master can I do that will go most easily for me? And I did a master in languages, French and Spanish. So, I was like, maybe it's not the right motivation. But I just knew, okay, I want to get this master. I wanted to live mostly. I wanted to live. Yeah. And I enjoyed my college years, of course.
Yeah, of course, college is fun. And I relate to what you said so much, because I had a similar experience. So when I was growing up, there was a lot of tension between my parents. And I mean, I would say all in all, I had a very good childhood, but there was definitely some instability emotionally. And I had a very similar relationship as you did with the education system. Like, I played the game because that's what we were supposed to do. I wanted to get good grades, but the whole time I was just like, I'm not learning anything. Like, I distinctly remember being in classes and being excited about reading that particular book or textbook, and then never getting to it because I was just swamped with busy work and homework.
And I will tell you why I loved my teacher of Latin and teacher of history so much, it's because they were always talking about other things. They were never looking at the textbook, and they were, even my history teacher, he didn't have a textbook. He didn't want us to learn about all the dates, the important dates.
Mm-hmm.
He would give like 3 newspaper articles and say like, what do you see here that relates to the French Revolution? Most of the other students hated those kind of exams. And I loved it because it made me think.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing with the Latin teacher. He was more a philosopher, and he was more like teaching us like how the Romans were living, how they were thinking, how in our current life, we can still use some of that philosophy, the Stoics and so on. And that's why those 2 teachers really, like put me on fire. And I read a lot, like since I could read, I went to the library, and the library has always been my, you could say, my happy place, my safe place, my quiet place. And whenever there was a situation at home, I could go to my room, like close the door and have my book and enter another world.
That's fantastic. So you obviously went to college. Would you have gone if it was, I mean, did you go mostly because your parents wanted you to, or would you have gone on your own either way?
I don't think I would have gone. I think I would just have maybe with my spare money bought a van and just go off and discover the world. Yes, just left. At 18, I think I would, that was my real dream, and just discover the world and see how things work in other countries, how people, just to get, like I have always had that fascination for people, that fascination for how different kinds of people deal with life, how their perspective on life. I think that's a very enriching, in observing other people, it always enriches.
Yeah, absolutely. So with your parents wanting you to go, excuse me, was that, why did they want you to, why was it important to them that you go to college? Is that, just common in your culture, or was it something they specifically believed about education?
It's common in their culture, and most of all, because they saw I had a capacity and I had such high grades that they were like, okay, if you like you stop school now, it would be such a waste of talent. That's how they saw it.
Sure. And you got some languages out of it. Now, I'm just curious, I mean, has the degree, have those degrees served you well, or has it been something that, you haven't really used a lot since then?
I haven't used it at all. I haven't used them at all. Of course, speaking many languages, especially in the middle of Europe,
sure,
is just something that's very important. Whenever, like my first job was in Brussels, and the more languages you speak in Brussels, the easier it is to find a very good job.
Sure. So you're obviously driven. You don't have any problem accomplishing the things you want to accomplish. And we're going to talk about a lot of the stuff that you've accomplished. First, I'm curious, is this kind of drive, is that common for women in Belgium?
No. Well, no. No, sometimes my kids say, Mom, sometimes you wish you would be a normal mom. They don't think I'm a normal mom. No, it is not. Even in my family, it is not. I have always been extremely driven. And do I know where it comes from? And even after, like the cancer, it was even like more. I don't know. I'm an achiever. I was born an achiever, and whatever I do, even when the kids were younger, I was not the typical mom who would cook night and day, but I was the mom who would look for the best gym club, the best swim club, like if they only said like one sentence, oh, I would like to go to gym, I would like go on my computer and look where the best coaches were, like to get my kids in a club. Right. I had one of my children went to was in the national team, junior team of gym. So I was really that mom who was always, also for school, I was the first one to go to to the head office and say if I thought that something were not, the way they were teaching. I would go very quickly, but in a very gentle way, and
Sure.
say like, I was that kind of mom.
And you
So
touched on it a little bit, but my next question was going to be if you remembered kind of when that started. Is that something that you can recall, like when your first, or I guess what is your first memory of being that self-directed, driven person? And I'm curious when you realized that you were just a little bit different in that regard.
Well, for me, my mom was her entire life chronically depressed and for a long time an alcoholic. Growing up with, you could say, that kind of role model, for me, it has always, from childhood on, because from very young, I was the oldest of three. I was doing the household. I was taking care of things. I told to myself, never, never, ever will I be like that. And it sounds like, and I love my mom. I can tell other stories now. She's sober. We have the best of, we went to this whole circle of healing, and like everything is, she's 73 years old now. She learned her lessons. She grew up with a trauma, like the whole thing.
Yeah.
But initially, as a kid, that was it.
Sure.
I will not stay in my couch and say like, I don't get up today. I will not stay in my couch and say to my kids, you're the reason why I'm tired. I will not stay in my couch. Like all those things were every time, no, not that.
Yeah. And I'm curious how you think about it now, because I when it comes to situations like that, I tend to think that, trauma and tragedy and things like that are difficult, there's always a lesson in there somewhere, right? There's always a way that we can use it to get better. I'm curious, what would your advice be to somebody that is in a situation like that right now to help them get through it?
It has certainly deepened my compassion. Very much, very much. It has taught me resilience also. It had taught me independence. Like from young on, I know that, how would you say it? That nobody owes me anything.
Sure.
And I don't owe anyone anything.
Right.
So like my happiness, I'm very self-reliant. That was the lesson for me. I would not guilt someone else into having what I want. But most of all, I could see the power of forgiveness, because I went through a whole cycle, like as a teenager, you're rebellious.
Right.
Then as a 20 something, I was taking more distance, 20, 30s even, taking distance from the entire situation because it was difficult, still difficult. But then coming in my 40s and seeing my parents getting older in their 60s, there was so much more understanding. I could so much see the hurt in my mom. I could so much see the self-hate in my mom. And it only, made my love growing for her, growing, forgiving her. And eventually, she's sober for 4 years now. So it's, nothing is as it seems. Drop judgment. I think I learned to drop. Where you in your teens, you're very judgmental. Everything is black and white. And the more you grow up, and you could say the more mature you get, the less judgment you have.
Yeah, I've always thought of it as there's an element of that. When you're younger, it's very easy to hold on to judgment because your world is still very much about you.
Yes.
What am I getting? Who's doing for me? All those things. And as you get older, you start to realize the world's a little bit bigger and you're just one part of it. And it's really more about what you can give.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And I think that's been helpful for me, even now when I face challenges, to realize it's not about me. How am I potentially contributing to the situation? And if I'm not, like you said, one of the best lessons I think people can learn is how to forgive. Because there are a lot of people that are just not good at that.
No. And the forgiveness is such a beautiful gift to yourself.
It is.
Because everything that is not forgiveness is poisoning your heart. It's poisoning your life. It's the filter that you are carrying through life is just negative.
So true.
And once you start to forgive, and I can tell you, I have a similar story with my mother-in-law, with whom I had a long time, a very difficult relationship, because for her, I was, she didn't like me to be, you could say, an independent, educated woman. She didn't like that.
Right.
And it's, I think, only 2 or 3 years ago, I really said to her how much I love and appreciate her. And you cannot believe what an effect it had.
Right.
And from that moment, so she not accepting me was just her fear of not being accepted by me. Once I could see that it was not more than fear, and I say, I accept you completely as you are. You are not lesser for me because you didn't go to college, because you went to school until 14. Right. I love you anyway. And I think saying to someone, I love you no matter what, is the most powerful thing you can do. And there's a lot of forgiveness included in that. Because if you cannot say, I love you no matter what, it's conditional. And you decide the condition for that love. And if that condition is not met, you don't want that person so-called in your life. So forgiveness is always a gift.
So powerful. So I want to talk a little bit more about your personality. And I've heard that you are an INFJ on the Myers-Briggs. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
I am.
I am going to read, I just grabbed a little bit off the internet, a quote about the INFJ, and I'm going to get your take on it. So the INFJ is the advocate. For anybody who's not familiar, the INFJ is one of the 16 Myers-Briggs personalities.
Yes.
The INFJ is the advocate. The advocate personality type is very rare, making up less than 1% of the population, but they nonetheless leave their mark on the world. Advocates have an inborn sense of idealism and morality, but what sets them apart is that they are not idle dreamers. These individuals are capable of taking concrete steps to realize their goals and make a lasting positive impact. So have you always had an inborn sense of idealism and morality?
Absolutely. And you could say that was my biggest internal struggle, that from childhood on, I was just as I was, like sunny, joyful, loving. And many times I heard like, you're too kind for this world. You're giving it, like you're giving too much. And I could not understand. I could not understand what they meant. But if you hear some things so long, you get brainwashed, and you
start to believe
and
it.
In the end, you start to believe it. So I was born with this innate, how you could say, like joy, and the sense of wanting to share that joy, and especially to reflect, because when I look at a person, I immediately see their potential, their beauty, their light. And then someone would say to me, you trust people too easily. And I would, and then I'm always, okay, there's something that I don't understand here, that I don't see here.
Right.
So yes, I was born that way.
So something else that I read on there, it talks about, people with your personality type can very often be found rescuing and doing charity and serving and doing things like that. But something that stood out to me is that it said their real passion is to get to the heart of the issue so that people need not be rescued at all.
Absolutely.
And this is, I relate to that a lot, because I'm a firm believer that, firstly, you can't really rescue people who don't want rescuing.
No.
And the best solution is typically prevention. So I'm just curious how that has sort of informed how you coach now that that's what you're doing.
In, first of all, creating like a safe place where people can speak up what's going on. I never give advice. I don't believe in giving advice. I listen, and I start to ask questions. And I think in asking powerful questions, I don't know if you're familiar, I'm sure you are, the work of Byron Katie.
Hmm?
So in asking very powerful questions, people often, very often, most of the time, come to some insights. And they're like, whoa, I believe that about myself, but that's a lie.
Right.
What I believe about myself is just a belief. It's not who I am. And many times you believe about yourself what you heard from your parents, what you heard in school, what you told yourself, what you made yourself believe. And once we can get that behind us, something new opens up. We no longer identify with our bank account, with our college degree, with our house, with our car. It's really that internal spirit that arises.
That's so true. And I just want to spend some time on that for anybody who's listening. So you can actually look up online. There's a series of questions that Byron Katie has is for
Yes.
coaching. I think there's 6 or something, and they're very powerful questions. But what Barbara's talking about that is super powerful is that this sense or this idea that your identity of your idea of yourself may not actually be yours, that you could have inherited the way your parents talked about you, the way your friends talked about you, the way you saw people interacting in the world. You could have developed this self-image based on your understanding, sometimes as a small child, and that may not be serving you. And so these questions are things that are designed to help you sort of start pulling back the layers on that and realize a much truer sense of who you really are, who you want to be. I love that so much. So I want to change topics a little bit, and I want to talk about environments because I believe that environments are very important in affecting how we develop and who we become.
Absolutely.
And I've heard that your home office is quite the sanctuary.
Yes. It's, well, you can't see it now because my husband was also working there. It's a library. There are, I think, 6,000 or 7,000 books there.
Wow.
And there's a grand piano. There are 2 desks, one antique desk, another desk, a modern desk. We have all our classical music there. And it's, you just in entering the room, you can, we have a lot of, like, how do you call that? Statues, like the head, sculpted heads of writers, of composers. It just breeds culture, history, knowledge, philosophy, and my husband and I both have a passion for books. So that's really something that connects us. And having created, I told you, my first happy place as a child was going every week to the library.
Right.
Just the library of town. And my husband and we've been able to create that in our house. We bought a house which was a house of an architect. And where he held offices before, we just built it into our office library. So it's really, yes, it's a sacred place.
So you mentioned a little bit, I would just love to hear you talk a little bit more about it specifically. What is it about that feel or your office or the library that attracted you? Why was that your place to go when you needed to get away?
It was a kind of, I could come home in books. I could relate to the writers. I would feel less, you could say, especially as a child, even as a teenager, was a kind of lostness. Like, where did I end up here on this earth? Like, there's so many things going on that I don't understand.
Right.
The way people treat each other is just not right. Like the way I've always so much, I'll tell you a story which will be in my book also. When I was 7, I just had my first communion, as we call it here. I was a baptized Catholic. Went to church, and it was the first time that I heard the story of the other cheek. So when someone slaps you in the face, turn the other cheek. When someone wants to steal, let's say, your shirt, well, give all your clothes. When someone, give even more. And I was like, oh my God, that's how I feel inside. That's how I feel. And that homecoming, and in books, I had that feeling like there's something more to life than the dullness adults make of it. And I think that was with book, the magic, the possibility, like that sense of there's more. We can create, like we can create a world. We can create a different world. That was, well, the most appeal to me.
So I have a similar relationship, especially when I was younger, with movies. It was an escape, I think, or maybe that's not the best word, but it was definitely, my ability at any time I wanted to get swept up in an adventure and exposed to all of the things that life had to offer, like you said, and just to be a part of so much more than where I was right now. I mean, I just spent hours watching movies, epic movies, really good stories and depth. So yeah, I love that. So coming back to your environment, I'm curious, you obviously put a lot of thought into your library. Is that something that you took throughout your home, or is that just kind of the one room that you put a lot of thought
into? No, there's books everywhere. We still need some new, like places, or how do you say that, cupboards to put them in.
Not enough storage for your books.
There's books on my night table. There's books on the table in the living room. There's books everywhere, and it's just, and for my husband too, it's something that expansion of for me, it's expansion of your mind. It's always getting a new perspective. Like if you could say the world, our views can be like a kaleidoscope. We only have one little glass. But when you read a book, you can maybe see another part of the glass, and then another part and another part. Always look through the lens of someone else to some events in life. And that is like very, for me, mind expanding. Of course, you have, you have to choose the books that can do that or give you that. It's the same with movies. You have movies who inspire you, and you have movies who are just empty. And I think with books, it's the same.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, I'd love to hear you talk about if somebody came to you and they wanted to hire you for coaching, and let's say maybe this situation or this conversation of environment came up, and it may not just be their home environment. Maybe it's their work environment. There's also the social environment of the people you spend time with.
Absolutely.
How do you start the process of coaching somebody into understanding the importance of their environment and how it affects them?
I would first see how their actual situation is. Maybe they have some people do it without knowing, creating a beautiful environment. Some people unconsciously have taken distance from all negative people in their lives. Some people do it unconsciously.
Right.
I would first see what is pulling them down. Is it a physical environment? Are they living in a mess? Are they watching the news all of the time? Or is it the people they have in their life? Is it gossip, drama? Is it, lots of negativity? I would just listen first, what's the biggest cause in their environment, or what is poisoning them most? People do not realize that we become what we eat, we become what we hear, we become what we surround ourselves with. It permeates, it permeates us. So people do not realize that enough. And the longer I'm on this journey, the more I had some people just stay behind. That's part of the process. And that's okay. People have the right to want to stay where they are.
Right.
But it won't hold me back. It can hurt. I've lost, one of my best female friends 3 or 4 years ago. The moment I started doing Facebook Lives, she was like, oh my God, Barbara, why are you doing this? Like building this Facebook page, those Facebook Lives. Do you want to get male attention? And I was like, what? What do you? And I could feel, and I hadn't seen, my husband had seen how she would treat me, but I hadn't seen it because I'm always looking for the good and the positive. And
Right.
but then there was a point, you know, like there's that, it's not that I was blind for her, but when you're a friend, you're just like compassionate.
Right.
But then there's that moment when all of a sudden it sunk into me, like, oh my God, she has no clue, or she cannot see what I want to bring into the world. And then, you know, like our ways separated rather quickly. And that's, you know, like it has hurt me for some weeks. But then it's like, you could say, a plaster that you detach. In the beginning it hurts, but then it heals. It's the attachment, you know, like you can be attached to people sometimes who are not so good for you. And it's a process of just taking distance.
So I think that's great advice. I would love to hear your advice. If, let's just say in working with somebody, you identified that part of their environment that was bad for them was somebody in their immediate family. What would be some of your advice for somebody in that situation where they maybe can't just cut that person out of their life forever? That person is just going to be around for a long time. How do they either internally or externally create a better environment?
First is setting healthy boundaries always. There are some things that are not acceptable. Some behavior, some words spoken to you. You can always, if someone is very disrespectful to you, get up and say in a very polite and gentle way, I do not accept this behavior. Even if you have accepted maybe for a long time because it was a family man. I do not accept this any longer. And if it's someone you don't see, I always advise also to forgive in your heart their behavior. Because if you change something within you, like I said with my mother-in-law,
right,
I had to live with her. And very long time, she was a very negative influence in my life. Very long time, I would always cry after having called to her. You know, like I called once a week to be polite. I was, you know, like she has only one son, and my husband is not someone who likes to do phone calls. So I wanted to be the good daughter-in-law. And I called her every week, and every week I would, you know, like put down the phone and I would start to cry because like for an hour she would have insulted me or say some things that were very hurtful. So at a certain moment, I said to my husband, I can do this anymore. I won't call her. So for a few years, I didn't call her anymore. And we would see her and she would like say, oh, how come you don't call? Are you mad at me? And I would just stay distant until the moment I had enough courage to just say the moment that I described, I accept you and I love you no matter what. But you have to be very powerful within your love and your kindness to say to that person, I love you no matter what. And it's as if you protect yourself with a certain, you could say, very powerful light and energy that other person, it's almost impossible for them to react negatively at that moment. But that's only when you are standing in your pure power.
Yeah.
As long as you're not there yet, it's just taking distance.
Right. No, it's so true. And I love that advice, because even if you can't necessarily, you know, never be around somebody, it's very easy to at least leave the situation. And
yes,
it does require a lot of courage and like you said, personal power to be able to take somebody being negative to you and calmly say, I don't want to be spoken to like that, or I'm not going to be a part of this interaction, and then walk out.
Absolutely.
That takes a lot of power. So there's definitely work to be done to cultivate that part of you, for sure.
Yes. And for some people, it was a lesson I had to learn in life.
Right.
I can tell you, my oldest daughter, who is very much like my husband, she would never have that situation, because she's immediately, when somebody talks to her in a disrespectful way, she's immediately like, stop, you don't treat me like that. And I think it's incredible. My second, who is very much like me, she'll have to learn the setting healthy boundaries lesson, certainly. So we each have our lesson. You know, like in our personality, we come into this world, we build this kind of personality, then we have to undo a lot. You know, like first we build it, then we have to undo. And in undoing, we become a lot more who we truly are, which is limitless, you know, like is free spirit. We are spirit first.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. And I wasn't even thinking about this until you just said it, but I'm curious, how do you, because for a lot of people, take comfort in their identity, and their identity is just based on who they have been or who they've told they are, or any of that stuff. But even, you know, let's just, for a physical example, let's take somebody who's 100 pounds overweight. If they've always been overweight, there can be a certain fear that comes from losing weight, because they don't know how to be that new person. So
absolutely,
how do you put somebody into that? Because changing your identity is, did I just lose you? There you go.
My battery is going down. I still have 20%. That's the self-image. That's all about self-image. And you will, if you have read, I know, psycho-cybernetics, like you can never outperform the image you hold about yourself.
Right.
So the image you hold about yourself is very powerful. It lives in your subconscious. So undoing people of, it's first about, if it's with people with overweight, I would look first at their eating pattern. Like, are they eating mindful? Are they seeing their body as a holy temple, as an instrument for their spirit, which it is? So in everything they eat, are they eating mindless and just filling a kind of void, filling, you know, like the void of self-worth, you could say, and trying to find a quick comfort in that food? First teach them that mechanism about eating mindful, and how you could say eating healthy and eating mindful is a gift to yourself. It's not a punishment, because for many people, like going on a diet, whatever, it's a punishment. It's not. It's a gift to yourself. And I can tell you, in 2 weeks, I will be 50 years old. It's at this age that you can see very clearly the difference in people who have in the last 20 years taken care of their body, and those who haven't. You don't see that 20, you don't see that 25, you don't see that 30. It's at an older age, and I can see that now. So I won't say the older I get, you know, like the more the more I advance in age, but because I feel young, the more I advance in age, the more I become mindful of. I rarely drink alcohol, where 20 years ago I wasn't even thinking, you know, like everybody had a glass of wine, I took a glass of wine. Right. And even I'm not, you know, like there's nothing in me that is longing for alcohol, that is longing for like fat, or longing. The chocolate is still hard. The chocolate is still hard, but I'm eating dark chocolate. So it's a process. It's a process. Healthy habits is a process. And just, you know, like every habit, even a morning routine, you know, the importance of a morning routine, meditating, everything is a process. And I believe in, you know, like the commitment, but then in the persistence, you know, like the persistence, that's the most difficult thing, especially when you're taking those steps on your own. That's why having a mentor or a coach, or even a kind of a program, or in a group with people who support you, are essential. I think that's one of the successes of AA. That's just having that support group. Without that group, it's already very difficult to stay out of addiction once you have been addicted.
Right.
And that support group is everything. And I think it's the same thing, whatever struggle, whatever your thing is that you're struggling with, is find someone who can support you in that.
That's so true. I love that. So you've got 3 kids.
Yes.
They're all, almost full grown, almost out. And I know that they were just babies when you were diagnosed with cancer, correct?
Absolutely. My youngest was 8 weeks old. So my second was 2.5 years old, and my oldest was getting almost 4. So 2 toddlers, you could say, and a baby. And I was 32.
Right.
So it was an enormous shock because I didn't feel ill.
Mm-hmm.
There was a black spot that was noticed on my knee, and it was a little black spot, and it kept bleeding. But I had just my 3rd child, like in 4 years, running a construction business.
Mm-hmm.
Was always busy. I didn't take 1 day of maternity leave.
Wow.
I came home, and the next day I went to the office with the baby.
Wow.
So my husband, after a few weeks, he was saying, like, honey, I want you to go to the doctor to have that spot, I was like, no, it doesn't hurt. I just put a little thing on it. There was coming blood and like liquid out of it, but I was like, and and one day, that's how he has to do it. He says, now I won't, you are going to take that telephone and you are going to call the doctor.
Yeah.
I was like, are you serious? Yes, yes. So I called the doctor, and he was like, okay with it. He said, you're going to hospital next week. It will just be 15 minutes. They will cut it out. It's going for research, and you're all well. And 10 days later, I was in the office on Monday morning. I get a phone call from the surgeon, and he says, well, it's Dr. Van der Put. And I didn't know who it was. I was like, who is this? And that was the surgeon who had cut it out. And he said, like, Mrs. Vercruysse, we have the tests have come back, and it doesn't look good. You have to come to hospital right now.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, no, I won't come. I'm in the office. I have a lot of work to do. Can I come next week? Or so? He was like, Mrs. Vercruysse, I don't know how to say this, but it's a melanoma, and it's very deep. And I was like, melanoma? What is that? And he said, it's a skin cancer. So I would like you to come right now, call your husband, that he comes too. And I was like, oh my God. And I just couldn't believe it. Like even when we drove to hospital, I kept saying to my husband, they have mixed up. They have mixed up something. I don't feel ill. There's nothing going on. And we arrived. And then, the whole process of first having they had to look further. And I had first a week of, how do you say that? Scans and tests and, like full week. And then the next Monday, I immediately had to stay in hospital for a first surgery. They cut all the, how do you say that? The flesh around, the skin, the flesh around the melanoma. And then they took a biopsy of a lymph node in my leg to see if there was any cancer there. And then on Saturday, I got some more bad news saying like, yes, the lymph node, there's cancer there. Wow. You have to come back next Monday. We have to take out all of the lymph nodes in your leg. Plus, it means you will have a year of chemotherapy because it doesn't look good at all. So at that moment, they thought I wouldn't probably survive the end of the year. And that was April. So for me, very quickly, first night in hospital, I was like overwhelmed for like half an hour, crying because I missed my children. And it was like more physical. When you have babies and toddlers, the hugs, the putting them in bed. And I was laying, and it was the first time, I think, in 40 years that I was without husband, without children, without, like
Right.
the warmth of a family.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at the ceiling and thinking, oh my God. And then very, very quickly, I made a mind shift. I was thinking, okay, those kids, they are so young. They have no clue what is happening. And they are staying with, like two with my parents, one with my parents-in-law. They are surrounded with love and warmth and kindness. So they do not suffer at this moment. And I was thinking, okay, how can I help myself best right now? What is the most helpful thing I can do? And I was like, okay, I will not allow one thought of negativity and one doom scenario in my head. That's the thing I have control over.
Right.
I put my faith in the doctors. I surrender, I believe that they will do anything what is possible in that, because it was like quite, even in hospital, it was quite a shock. It was like, oh, that woman with her, with her baby, she's going to die. And like all the doctors I was always with 3 or 4 doctors around my bed, everybody doing everything within their power to still save me, because it was like so few percent that I could be saved. Yeah. And the next day I told my husband, okay, you bring me this and this and this book about cancer survivors. I wanted to read about how people in that situation dealt with it and how they survived. So I wanted to read positive stories about people who survived and how they dealt in the process. And I really had to educate, you could say, the people around me, because the first weeks my husband was a mess. And I understand. He was practically told that he would be a widower at 32 years old.
Right.
With the business, but I really had to tell him, like, okay, you can cry at home all you want, but you will not cry anymore in this hospital room. That doesn't help me. Same with my parents. My parents were in their early 50s and they were crying. They were like, oh my God, what a, like everybody. Even I had friends from high school, from, like elementary school, visiting me, like as if it was the last time they would see me.
Right.
So I really had to say, even set my husband at the door of the hospital room and say, like, you come in, you smile, you're positive, and no tears here, no, and one of the things I did not want to do neither was to repeat how painful surgeries were, to repeat how painful or how awful the chemotherapy was, because in repeating that, you relive it. In reliving it, you weaken yourself. And I could feel that physically. So maybe it's one of the advantages of being very sensitive. You feel what's good for you very quickly. You feel what's not good for you. So that's one thing, was like that I had realized the power of our own thoughts, the power of how we can help heal ourselves. I'm like very sure of that. You help heal yourself. Absolutely. And then the thought about my legacy, like I was 32 and I was really thinking, like, if I die right now, would I be happy with the life I'm looking back at? And I was not, because I started a business 5 years before that, construction business, which was the same kind of business that my parents did. And it was quite an unconscious choice. I just wanted to have a business, and that was the kind of business that I knew.
Right.
But I hadn't, dived very deep in what I really wanted, because we are not taught to do that. Like it's not something that is in our culture. I think very deeply why you want something. So it gave me all those months, like in hospital and having chemotherapy, gave me that time. Like, what is it that really makes my spark? What is it that instead of looking back at 32, if I would be able to look back at 90 years old, what kind of life would I like to look back on? And that's how it formed, you know, like, and it's a slow process. It's not like I closed my business the next year. I continued my business for 13 more years. Mm-hmm. So you have your investments, you have reality, you have your kids growing up.
Right.
But it, you know, like, I see it now, of course, as a blessing. Without cancer, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And there's so much that we could continue to go on with that. One thing you mentioned that I love, partially because I believe it as well, and I think it's so powerful, is the effect of your mind on your physical body. And
yes,
you mentioned being a really sensitive person, and just kind of intuitive. At that point, was that just something that you sort of knew intuitively, or had you already been reading and consuming and learning material that had, you know, planted that idea in your mind?
Not so much. I always have read a lot of philosophy, mm-hmm. but not so much self-development, spirituality a bit. No, it was only during my process also of the year that I had chemotherapy that I first went to Eastern philosophy, Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. I made a lot, you know, like this long detour through all, you could say, spirituality, self-development. Each book put me on the path of another book. I was always, oh, wow, that's, you know, like, and I went from one book to another. And after that, I had my chemotherapy, then I went to all kinds of retreats, conferences, seminars, you know, like I started doing that. And then it's like I said, sometimes we have natural things within us, and it must have been quite natural that I knew that my thoughts could heal me or help heal me, because I'm very conscious also that in my subconscious, because I'm part of, you could say, Western culture, in my consciousness is the belief that the doctors heal us. It's still there somewhere, you know? Mm-hmm. I know that. So I always trust the doctor too. I wouldn't say that I personally, Barbara Vercruysse, could heal myself entirely with my thoughts, because I was raised in a culture where we say the doctors heal us. So right. That's still somewhere there.
I love that. I'm curious, having experienced that, if somebody was in a similar situation now, and obviously with coronavirus, it could be much more real if somebody is mm-hmm. diagnosed as ill or loses a loved one or faces one of these mm-hmm. sort of tragic circumstances, but doesn't have that same level of intuition. How would you coach them into, you know, taking better care of their thoughts and getting into a position where their thoughts are more powerful and less disempowering?
Okay. First of all, I would say, like, if people go in that negative self-talk, in that doom, is this the best alternative for you? Is this the best choice you can make now? And most people think they are their thoughts. Most people think they are who they are. Mm-hmm. They are their body and they are their thoughts, but we are not. You know, like, there's something behind all of that, you know, like the spirit part of us, that spark of consciousness in us, which is connected to the whole, you know, like the whole consciousness, that part. So make them in questioning, like, is this most helpful for you now? Is this the best? And doing it in a way that I'm always making them realize themselves, never going like, I'm wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. No, right. Like, you have to think like me. Never from that position, because then you create a kind of tension. Mm-hmm. And people in it's even an energy. If you're like very like, I'm right, then the other will have the intention of, like it's like energy. You pull back and not go in that energy, but more embrace, like, okay, so that's your thought right now. Very often it's unconscious, like it just pops up and we choose where we focus on. Me, I have certain patterns too. If sometimes I have not a result that I want, I can see myself starting beating up myself. You should have done this, you should have done that. And it's a default pattern. So in seeing it, I start saying like, it's okay. It's okay. It's you, like that achiever side who is, like beating yourself up now. No need. And the power of seeing what your default thought patterns are, and especially what the result is. If the result is pulling yourself down, making yourself miserable, why would you do that? Why would you make yourself miserable? There's no reason. And just by thinking like, oh my God, like I'm gonna die. Oh my God, this virus, like if I meet someone, oh my God. No, you're safe. You're at home. If you do, like as you're told, you save, you stay away from other people, you're safe. Nothing bad is going to happen. And then, even I meditate every morning for the healing of the world. I know that I contribute if we pray or we meditate. For many people, it might sound who are living, you could say, the more limited, materialistic version of our lives, can say, oh my God, like that doesn't make any sense. And yet there's so much scientific research which says that if a large group of people start to pray, magic starts to happen. And for me, it's like, even if it wouldn't help, it's a good feeling for me. Like praying for the healing of the world, even if it wouldn't help. But I know it helps. But even then, it's better than spending my time in the couch watching Netflix in a fearful state.
Yeah, 100%. And that would be my challenge for anybody who's listening and maybe thinking meditation or any of that is kind of woo-woo or controlling your thoughts, because the evidence is there. You just may not have been exposed to it yet. And like you said, even if it doesn't do anything, just try it and see if it makes you feel better. I think that's so powerful.
Yes.
There was
especially it's taking your power back. It's so strange that we have been learned to give our power away. We give our power away to what other people say. We give our power to material possessions. We give our power to a certain reputation. We give our power to the amount of money we have. And in fact, all the power is within us. We are like creators. We are creative beings. We have everything within us. And we are just like taught just the opposite.
So,
and I'm listening.
Sorry, there's a quote on your website that is like very relevant to what we're talking about here, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I think you've just answered some of it. Empowering people, supporting them, and taking their lives to the next level, sharing love, wisdom, and compassion have become her life mission. So you've answered my question, which was, what is it that disempowers people, which is that we give our power away. Are there any other sort of disempowering aspects of our life? Why do we get down in the first place?
It's always a false perspective on things. Always. All we could ask ourselves, like, whether you're religious or not, like, that God accepts us as we are, with our flaws and with our, like, why can't we do that and say, it's okay, it's okay? And that false perspective, like we are deficient in some way, that we are not okay, is a start for going into, like when we feel down, it's always you could say a disalignment with who we really are. If we are truly aligned, we can stay out of these thoughts, because we know I would say we identify with that spark within us, which is joy. look at a child, like look at the joy of a child who
Right.
doesn't care what someone else says. Look, like if you cannot relate with a God, like if that's difficult for you, then just go within the childlike joy. And if you look to real, you could say, masters, great personalities, they still had that childlike spark. Look at the Dalai Lama. He can be so silly and funny, and still he's like one of the most important people in the world. He
Right.
could put on, like a crazy hat and start laughing like a child. It's just that lightness, bring that lightness in our life. Is not meant to be dull and to be, like heavy and a burden. No, it's because our perspective, like somewhere we made it like that. It's, if you look at nature, if a tree starts to bloom and to blossom and to, it's expansion, it's like it's abundance. And for some reason we think that we are not abundant, we have nothing to offer. We always have a smile to offer or humor to offer, we always have something to offer. But then we think, oh no, but I don't have the right education. Oh no, I missed the right connections. Oh no, you don't miss anything, because there were people who didn't have that either, but just they had the spark and they followed their spark anyway. And they could mute those voices.
So how do you, I understand the concept. How do you act? What does that actually look like if you're coaching somebody either personally, because you coach people and businesses, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
if somebody is disempowered and they're in that place where they feel limited and all, what does it actually look like, the process of moving them back into a place where they feel powerful?
I keep asking them questions. Like, is this true? Do you know that this is true? Is this not simply something you believe about yourself, which you have come to think is true? And then empower them with stories, or empower them with personal stories, or empower them with things that I went through and how I dealt with things, because I have been quite faced. I think if you're talking out of experience, it's such a different place as a coach to talk out of experience than to talk out of your head, out of some theoretical knowledge. So first of all, you could even say that in my vibrations, in who I am, in my voice, there is a healing aspect, an aspect where they put their guard down, they open up, and we can go right through the essence, like the underlying cause. And if you get there, mostly it's something, you could say a certain event, a certain more events that have led them to a certain kind of thinking, and just uncover that, like an onion, peel it off until they see, wow, I am awesome and I am an amazing person. I just couldn't see it anymore.
That's great. So I'm curious, because you obviously have so much experience in coaching other people and helping them achieve and be better and do so many things. So why do you still work with a coach personally?
To expand, always. For me, it's always it's like the onion. The layers keep coming.
Right.
The layers keep coming. And I think that's because I had periods where I stopped working with a mentor or a coach, and I plateaued. Absolutely. I plateaued. Sure. You have to know that the more you expand your being, your spirit, everything in your life follows. That means the quality of your relationships goes up. The quality of your income, like your income increases, the number of clients. It's just a natural flow of your being expanding. So if you stop, you could say, having a coach or a mentor, there is maybe some kind of complacency, like I'm there, but
Right.
you're never there. You're ever expanding, you're ever growing, like this universe. We are ever expanding and growing, and having someone who can always, like keep, well, you keep having that soundboard, and you keep just having an accountability partner, like someone who you talk to. You have to keep working on yourself. One of my greatest inspirations and mentors is Bob Proctor. He's in his 80s, 85. He has been working on himself like 60 years. And every morning he gets up at 3:30 a.m. and he studies at 85 years old. It's all in, it's not like you read one self-help book and you have a coach for 6 months, that your life is perfect. Not at all. It's years, and you have been programming yourself for 30 or 35 or 40 years. It takes some time for the deprogramming. It takes time, but it's a journey and it's an adventure, and it's just phenomenal, because you get all that power back that once you gave away, and it's such you learn so much. Like it's like things falling from your head, like from your eyes, and it's like you've been blind, and then you start seeing. I think that's kind of the process.
You mentioned earlier the sort of the vibration of your voice and having a healing nature in there. And I want to read, this was also on your website, I believe. In spreading a message of love and kindness, Barbara believes in the ripple effects of her kind words. With that being said, I'm curious how you think about things like impact and contribution in what you do and just how you interact with people.
That, as you said, as part of my personality, INFJ, for me, it's very strongly, I have a very strong message. I very strongly feel like I'm a messenger. And I have held back that voice, or mute that voice, you could say, from my 20s until the cancer, not immediately after, because I had to discover that voice again. And it was the power of kindness and the power of love. And it sounds very cliche, I know. But people, in this, you could say, in this world, we think there's so much evil out there. We think the world is a dark place. And for me, I have come to see the darkness can only be an invitation for you to be the light. Instead of having the darkness pull you down, let the darkness inspire you to be the light. So if you have a lot of rudeness in the world, a lot of hate, just, like in being kind to a rude person, in being loving to a hateful person, the more people will do that, I know one day we will outnumber, because we have to re-educate people how we are naturally. We are not naturally hateful. It's not natural. We are not naturally fearful. It's not natural. And just re-educate them in seeing that. I think at the basis of all that fear and hate is a scarcity mindset, like there's not enough. That need, like feeling that need to protect something, that it would be taken away.
Right.
But nobody can take away you. You have your value. They maybe can take, let's say now, and I've lived with the end of the construction business. I had the HR company making a huge mistake. I was betrayed by 2 of my employees, and I ended up in a few weeks with 200,000 euros of debt.
Wow.
I had to end the company. And I had like my ceiling moment again. And I was lying in bed and watching the ceiling, and I was like, oh my God, I survived the stage 4 cancer to end up here. And then I was thinking, okay, Barbara, because that day we had a call from the bank that they might sell our house to, and I was like, okay, first of all, there's always a solution for everything. And second thought was, even if they take away our home and we have to go to live with the 5 of us in a small apartment, or even if I would become homeless, I would still be a good person. And that, like that sense of self-worth, I needed to experience to be almost, because I wasn't, like we had a settlement with the bank and with some creditors. But that sense of self-worth, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But all my life, I had been very unconscious about money and possessions because it was always there. I always made money. I grew up, like we had bought this dream house. We were driving the BMW SUVs, and like we had everything.
Right.
And then boom. And I could see it as a sign of the universe telling me, Barbara, your construction business, it's okay. You had to, like, let go a lot earlier. If you won't listen right now. And I had to reinvent myself at 46 years old. And having that sense like, okay, there is something, I have something to offer to the world. So that, and rebuilding myself, rebuilding my business. Like one of the first offers of opportunities I got was to work with BMW. It was not as a business coach in the beginning. It was more like administration, work far below my capacities, you could say. But I said yes. And if you are striving for excellence in all you do, within 6 months, I was part of the management team. It's just, like always going with a smile, even if it's to clean the floors and to clean the toilets. You do it with a smile. You just learn some humility. We are never too, like, it's a lesson. And if I lose everything tomorrow and I have to go and wait tables, I'll do it with a smile. But at the same time, I will be thinking, can I create a business? What can I do? Like always having, you have the reality check, the money has to come in, you have children, but then always building your dream. Even if you have a setback, never lose your long-term vision. So, and I could build, like rebuild myself. And now, Rory, nothing can take away that sense of self-worth I have. It cannot be taken away anymore. Even if the bank or I would be robbed or taken every material possession from me, I would stand up tomorrow. Okay, it would be like a knockout, but I would get up again and I would say, okay, world, I can deal with this. Even at my 50, I know I have something to offer. And that, yes, so my almost bankruptcy, I didn't go bankrupt, but my almost bankruptcy was also a blessing.
There's so much wisdom in that, because even in that tough situation, I mean, which would paralyze most people, you already were able to have the frame of mind to think about how it was serving you, or pushing you out of something you maybe didn't need to be doing. I think that's so valuable, again, especially right now with so many people not having work or struggling to get things you need. I just think there's so much value in the asking yourself in the middle of a struggle, how is this making me better? Or how is this struggle serving me in some way?
And not listening, because I had some people around me who said like, oh my God, Barbara, you're 46 years old. You will never find a job again.
Right.
I was like, huh? Why would you say that? No, like, everybody can find a job. I'm so convinced we all, because if you have that attitude of willingness and wanting to learn, you can start anywhere. And quality always, like, that's why within 6 months I was in a management team, because I was able to show. If I wouldn't have been able to show, I would have looked for something else. I wouldn't have stayed there for too long. So there's always, it's that sense of possibility. The entire universe is becoming, is the possibility. And that's something which is very difficult for our mind, because if we go into quantum physics, we are looking into the past now. We are looking into thoughts realized. So what we see is what we thought before. And if we want to change that, we have to change our thinking and believe in possibilities.
I love that. Barbara, it has been so much fun talking to you and connecting with you all this.
Okay.
I love your story. I love your wisdom. I love your spirit. I want to give you an opportunity to share with the audience. How can they connect with you if somebody wants to work with you or talk to you, or what are the ways that
the easiest thing is go to my website. You can leave the link of my website. Sure. Because there they will see there's a possibility for personal coaching. I also started a mentorship program, which is more about group coaching, which might be more affordable for some people. And I have an online shop also where some of my courses and books can be bought, but it's all on my website.
That's fantastic. And I'll put links to that in the show notes for sure.
Yes.
So one last question, and this is actually relates to something I saw on your Instagram. You had a post up there and it said, one day you will be a memory for some people. Try and be a good one. I'm curious to hear you talk about what legacy means to you.
Legacy means leaving some of that unique spark of yourself here in this world, of your uniqueness as spirit, that whenever people, even legacy is every moment, you could say, making every human encounter a sacred moment. It is a sacred moment. We have lost eye for that. And you are building legacy every second. So if that person walks away and has not heard a friendly word that entire day, but you were the one, and sits in his couch and has a smile thinking, wow, Barbara said something so nice to me, that's building legacy. And doing that, if you, for me, like I'm impacting, with my Facebook lives, millions. But if I cannot do that in my own house, under my roof, if I cannot do that with you right now, it's about every encounter, not only the public encounters where you could, it's every encounter as a human being. Give some of your spark. And once when you're gone, like this lifetime, that when they look back and they think about you, that in their memories, they always have a smile.
That's wonderful. Barbara, we share so many beliefs that I don't even think we got to talk about half of them. Thank you so much for sharing. For everybody listening, I will put in the show notes links to her social media, to her website, different ways that you can connect with her. Thanks everybody for listening. Barbara, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a blast.
Yes, thank you.